We're in the studio again, joined with our friend Sean from Wildcraft Cider. Sean, how are you doing?
JJ, good to see you. I'm great. Thank you.
Doing well. How's the spring for you now?
Man, it's beautiful. You know, it's always really busy getting our cellar products out. Cracking casks.
Okay, so now for the cider world, I always think fall is the big time. You're harvesting, you're juicing, you're making cider. What is the job now in the spring?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We are a wild fermentation program. Hold up, let me rephrase that.
Okay.
Wildcraft operates off of spontaneous fermentation. So that requires spring yeasts to be viable, vibrant. When the trees are blossoming and they're blooming is when the birds and the bees are active and the pollinators. And we rely on untamed, unorchardized fruit for our harvest each year, which produces the spectacular natural fermentation that's clean, ages very well, has an abundant amount of microflora, microfauna, and contributes to a really complex cider in the spring.
Well, you're using an awful lot of big words there. For
know,
some of those
too
people
many.
that don't know.
All right, let's just keep it real.
What is the difference between the spontaneous wild fermentation, as you said, in comparison to what we might see as regular fermentation in like a Bud Light, some regular bull crap beer?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's natural wineries that exist all across the country in small form. Natural wine was really original form of winemaking. It was all about stewarding the land correctly. If you have a beautiful, well manicured, and perfectly tended plot of land, then the wine makes itself. And that tradition we've kind of got away from in the sense of, well, if we're commercializing a product, we can just have this isolated yeast and we got a way to lab test it. I just saw a commercial recently about Microsoft engineering beer now. It's like, look at this hands-off approach. There's no human hands touching any of it. Like, you get your ingredients, it tests it for you, and it pumps what you need in, and then here you're manufacturing out a product that's consistent, which obviously humans are incredibly routine people, though. Now they expect the same thing over and over and over again. But you'll get consistency year over year if you go towards like an untamed and wild model like we do. And so what we are is a natural winery, essentially, but we harvest apples and not grapes.
Okay, so then springtime, when you're checking up on the process of the wild fermentation, what does that include? Are you then tasting casks like a winemaker would and kind of seeing how things are moving along the process?
Yeah, so spring is when everything is at its peak. So all the barrels, before it starts heating up for the summer, are at its peak. They've undergone like a real slow, cold fermentation through the winter, and they're starting to rise up. Most of our cider from last year has kind of been processed and racked and pulled away off of yeasts and is just aging at this point. And that's right at that April, May time is when I find the cider is at its best. So we start open up the casks and put them into bottles and share them on taps. And I love to share all those cellar reserves because we've done 250 lots this last year, lot meaning one piece of property.
Oh, wow.
And each one has a different, array of flora in the spring. So one property's got a lot of like canola blossoming or dandelion, or, we'll have certain grasses that'll impart flavor. And this is the time of year where all of that terroir, which is a French word for the aspect of the territory, it starts to shine in the following spring. Mm-hmm. So we do this Fiddlehead festival every year to celebrate and honor that tradition and saying, well, what's abundant and abound when the apples are starting to bloom, all these other blossoms and all these wild areas that are unsprayed and untampered with that's the fruit that we want. And that is what keeps us in business, so to speak, and keeps us producing a higher quality cider.
Is cider, could it be called almost apple wine in this sense because of all the natural fermentation that you're doing? And then, as you talked about with all it encompasses all these little bits of the territory and the little flavors, if there's dandelion, or if there's basil nearby, or if there's ginger or garlic growing, or, if it's just more of an earthy taste. It sounds a lot like wine, but then again, I buy all my wine in a box.
I've considered doing boxed ciders. I don't blame you.
Great.
There's nothing wrong with a little lack of carbonation, but cider by definition is a sparkled beverage.
Yeah.
You know, when I used to just do like small batch, and I still do this property to property, well, I'll just put fresh juice in a mason jar, seal it up, the lid will bulge, and you just keep cracking it ever so gently, you know, let off all the CO2 pressure. And then once it stops cracking on you, you just seal it up, put it in the pantry, it'll drop clear, and then you open it up and you get a natural sparkle later on. So cider is really a sparkling beverage made from apples. And, you know, what we're used to these days is more of a sweet profile, right? Sweet cider making these days, I guess on a commercial level, it does require quite a few chemical processes in order to employ that. Also, pasteurization. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm guilty of drinking Sprite once in a while. I like the taste.
Heck yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not anything that I'm trying to say anything against.
Right.
However, when it comes to more of a natural product like we make, there are no additions. It is simply the fruit that's processed from wild areas, which is dry crop. Can't certify organic, but it's close enough. I mean, really, it's better than organic in my opinion. You have other aspects of the territory influencing the flavor and also becoming more of a probiotic. So they are live products. They're not pasteurized. They are live, and they contain what I can't, and I'm not authorized to say it's healthy, but do contain some beneficial bacterias that are important for our springtime too.
Live cultures.
Live cultures.
Yeah.
You know, they say the best allergy medicine is to
Drink a tablespoon or a teaspoon of local honey.
local honey, and what are the bees doing is they're going and grabbing nectar off the blossoms, and there's a lot of yeasts in those honeys as well, you know.
Yeah, and that didn't even quite occur to me. You always think of like the pollen and the other things, but then you're using this natural occurring yeast in the wild to make a great cider.
It's microfauna. It's the living organisms that are existing in the wild. So the reason that spontaneous fermentation is not something that can really be done by orchardized fruit or by concentrated juice, I mean, unless you're in an area that's already developed a really strong yeast culture, is because even in organic orchards, there's a lot of maintenance that happens in the spring to keep down pests. Mm-hmm. And so you're really tampering the dominant yeast strains that are there. So you have to have wild areas, you know. I have found the most beautiful, cleanest ferments are some of the most wild, untamed, blackberry overridden areas that we harvest fruit from, and they just make a spectacular, internationally premier level cider.
It's similar to how you talked about with Microsoft having been untouched by human hands. You're trying to find areas of property and areas of fauna and fruit that's been untouched
by human hands, and then the rest is our sensory.
Yeah.
We don't do lab. It's all human sensory. It's by palate, it's by feel, it's by intuition. It's getting closely connected with our landscape in a different way. It's almost somewhat spiritual in that way.
And you keep it sulfide free, which is very unique to you, extremely unique to you, because I don't know if there's anyone else that can truly say that they're 100% sulfide free as you are. And I always have to remind myself on what a sulfide is, but I know that we don't like them because they leave like a film in your mouth. Ugh.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's approved by the FDA. It's not like anybody's putting anything in your body that, you know, has not been approved to drink, but we all have mild allergens to it.
Yeah.
You know, and what's different about cider, I think in winemaking, it's historically been such a added ingredient, and they put such small quantities in that because of the pH, and we can get into the technicalities of it, but cider is a lower acid juice. So therefore, it's going to need more sulfite to do the job. And in most cases, the amount of sulfites that need to go enter in order for it to protect and preserve against wild yeast is essentially what it's trying to do, right? Is, you know, it goes beyond even the FDA limits. So then what cider makers will do, and what's taught in school, is to add synthetic acids to drop the pH down, so you don't have to add as you can stay below the legal limit, but it's still considerably more. And so I do notice, you know, when I drink ciders that are just more like very, very heavy commercial produced, I get real flushed on the face, and you can get a little bit of heartburn from it. So there is a reactive force to that, you know, and maybe I'm just a purist and maybe I'm sensitive, but I just don't like to drink it.
I like
That's just me, you know.
I like your sensitive side. I really do.
Oh baby.
What it feels like, because you're choosing to work with the natural occurring yeast and do this wild fermentation, you don't have to fight it with sulfides. You're kind of embracing the profile that comes with it.
Yeah, everything. It's been exposed to everything in our facility. It's not like, we're hiding it.
Right.
So it does have a shelf stable quality also, I find. But like I said, and we'll kind of revere back to the importance of land stewardship and the importance of harvesting wild fruit, because it contains all of the necessary yeast and bacteria for proper preservation long term. If I'm just going towards like a really, big commercialized fruit income, we don't have any protections. And so I see that, you wouldn't want to risk. I mean, I understand why that method is employed. What I'm looking to do is to sort of be a regenerative force of environmental activism in our community and try to raise awareness against spray and what it actually does to our wild habitat, and become more of a community of organic process. And we do have a great amount of community activist members, environmental activist members that are really pushing for a positive stride in land recovery and land rehabilitation.
And that's kind of what brings you're here today. I mean, we like having you here no matter what. But it sounds like you got a situation coming up this weekend just to kind of highlight that, to bring back that importance, and, as you put it, have a lighthearted kind of discussion or council, or kind of just talk about how we should go about land stewardship in the 21st century.
Yeah, it's a celebration. The Fiddlehead Festival is our spring celebration to highlight and not only the cider and start opening those casks, but also to highlight community members that are a bigger part of this whole project, that we wouldn't be able to stay active and keep growing without community is very important to this whole project. It requires an entire entire element of not only the arts and the crafts and the passion, the environmentalists and the orchardists, and people that actually have a passion towards our landscape and our people and our fundamental social values as a people. That really brings us together, and this festival is really to celebrate and commemorate that greater community and to taste what's happened this last year and what we've all been a part of.
Yeah, it's similar to how the wild fermentation works, where you're taking this wild yeast and all these elements from outside, within the territory, in this sense, your community, and you're bringing them all together and seeing how they taste and how they reflect against each other and how they mingle and how they crash and how they don't mix and how things can be improved. And you just want to experience each of these different sects of your community, because it's your community, it's your laboratory, it's your orchard, it's your domain, it's where you live, and all these flavors in your community essentially are going into Wildcraft, whether you know it or not, because
whether it's important to you or it's not, the product is still good.
Absolutely.
But this is to celebrate that, and you want to just come watch music. We got a Friday night conversation piece where I'm hosting Anna Bradley of Whole Earth Nature School. I'm going to be hosting my friend Dan Silva, who was supposed to be part of our press crew last year, and he's just a fantastic friend and dear friend who went through a near fatal car accident and is now an amputee. But just watching his positive spirit coming out of a coma and getting through this, and his story is very inspiring, but he's also a very funny human being, and it's a real pleasure to be around him. So it's always nice to bring in the aspect of personal activism, how people fight to stay alive, and what their mission becomes when they come out of that. And then we got Pablo Alvarez, who is with Beyond Toxics, which I'm sure quite a few people are familiar with Beyond Toxics. It's an organization that helps, right now is fighting a bill on aerial spray, actually. They are, not only for pollinators, but they do a lot of data collection on what's happening with chemical use in our timberlands. They're a fight for positive activism and lobby in our courthouse to try to pass bills to get rid of these toxins in our landscape. So they're a perfect community partner. But then Pablo Alvarez is also, he's really an activist geared towards the people, and he'll have some funny things to say. I believe that. And
I get a kick out of when people are like, well, I don't care if they aerial spray on that side of the mountain. I'm on this side of the mountain. Really? Well, I don't care if they pollute upriver. I'm down, I guess. I don't. Either way, like it's all going to get there sometime.
It does.
And it sounds so. It's Friday and Saturday, a 2-night event. Doors at 6.
Doors at 6 on Friday. If you show up before 8 o'clock and buy a bottle of the Beltane Dew, which is our, now we're going to get into that, right?
Yeah.
The Beltane Dew is our spring release of Higher Arcana series that includes botanicals and slightly more, more ethereal fermentation experiences. So this Beltane Dew is a cider. It's a blend of wild fermented mesquite honey mead.
Okay.
And barrel-aged heritage varieties, wild fermented heritage varieties. But what's unique about this is that I blend a wild botanical hydrosol. Hydrosol is a distillate of water that includes botanicals, so like a gin, but not alcohol. And I don't put water in my cider normally, I mean, unless I never put water in my cider.
Yeah, there wouldn't be any need to, really.
Right.
Yeah.
But mead, you have to soften the honey down, and
Yeah.
we've used Opal Spring water, fresh Opal Spring water right out the spring. It's the second cleanest watershed in North America, I've learned, which is really interesting. We could get into that, but wild fermented mesquite honey cider with hydrosol.
Okay. I don't know much about any of those things.
That's why it's ethereal.
Right.
It's an ethereal experience.
And I think that's what I love most about, in a sense, you and your product, because they're one and the same, is that you've created something that you really love and is of great quality, and then you've looked out ways to sustain that production, and almost fell into all these categories, as you said, of conservation, of microbiology, of activism, of community involvement, because now you're finding that all these same resources, you love having them to make this great product, so you want to keep them, and that they also have such a greater effect on everyone else. Like our landscape, we want to keep that around just more so you can make great cider. I mean, I want to keep the landscape around just because it's the landscape.
What's interesting about it, though, is it happened in reverse from that. It wasn't like, I want to make cider, I need to do this.
Okay.
So, years and years and years and years ago, I've been working with conservation networks, stewardship groups, to help funnel and channel their waste resources, so to speak, off of their restoration projects. So they go in and really, it takes a beating on a swath of land to go in there and get it back regenerated. We're so beat up around here in our wildlands. But in that, there's a lot of recovery and there's a lot of ingredients that come off of these removals. And I was helping them channel their resources to local businesses that otherwise are shipping in cargo container loads from elsewhere of these particular products, while meanwhile on the hillside we're just paying to remove and having no recovery, and giving our grant funding towards those efforts. Why not look at ways to recover and help develop a little bit of a more sustainable funding program towards our restoration habits? And through that, the discovery of so many of the ingredients had started to happen, and I was looking at how do I define different businesses that are not currently using some of the ingredients. And so Wildcraft as a principle sort of evolved. The cider is a lubricant towards getting some of these bigger projects done. Now I would say that that Wildcraft helps bring people together to focus on the larger picture and helps educate us all on what we really do have and why it's important to take care of it.
And that's, to another, part of the great part of your product and your love of it is that you're educating not only yourself, you're learning and doing things to improve yourself as a craftsman who's wild at heart, I know that. But you educate idiots like me and consumers like me who, man, this tastes really good. This helps the environment. Just help me understand why all these things are important and what they can do if properly put together.
Well, I kind of look at what's our food source. I mean, we've grown generationally these gigantic gaps between our food and what we eat. So to know where your food comes from, I see it's becoming increasingly more important for people. It doesn't seem to quite be locking in that what's around us is food. I had a funny story, actually. I was talking on the phone in a long conversation, and I'm kicking around outside, and I always like sweep or I do something to I get like this nervous energy when I'm talking on the phone. Or I just stay moving, right? And I'm in this long conversation, and there's this little fir tree, and it's got little fir tips on it, right? And I like to snack them, so I'm sitting there, I'm snacking on the fir tips.
You eat them?
And this woman comes up, there's like a whole houseless camp right there. She says, "You can eat those?" I said, "Yeah, they're really high in vitamin C. I mean, it's tasty. It's a nice little snack,
The little tips of the fir tree.
Yeah, little tips."
Okay.
And
I hit it.
she comes up, she takes a bite, kind of hacks on it for a second, and I don't know if she was expecting what it was. And then
Obviously
bites
an acquired
another,
taste.
and the next thing you know, the whole houseless camp is over there surrounding the entire tree and biting off all the fir tips. I mean, I think by the time I got off the phone, that thing was completely removed of fir tips. And I'm thinking, wow, even people that are hungry and starving and are surrounded by food, we are so far removed that our habitat actually contains food. Not only does it contain food, it contains medicines, it contains lotions, anything that we use, it contains. And I'm not saying I go buy my Tom's of Maine deodorant, and I'm not a hyper
You're not making that
stickler dude, I do. I'll make. If I had more time, I'd probably make everything, and because I know about it, and because I really enjoy the process, and in some way that process helps us connect us with our surrounding environment, and in turn really makes us more healthy, as people. So what I'm trying to accomplish through Wildcraft is making that connection, saying, no, this is food. We shouldn't treat it like that. You wouldn't want to treat your garden that way. You wouldn't even eat out of your garden if you knew that's how it was handled. And I think the same is true for a lot of people, when they go and they, we're really marketed at, and as we all know, there's a lot of marketing happening behind the scenes to try to present you, this is what the product is, and, there's all these new standard certifications, and then someone pushes the boundary of that certification where they discover that, oh, this is actually not what we think it is. But it's always been a marketing ploy that just keeps persisting with larger corporations, and I'd like to stay more small batch, mission oriented, and local community organizer.
Yeah, building that relationship with your food, and I appreciate how you call everything ingredients, just like how people would say, I say that there's tools all around me. If you can get any job done, if you can just recognize the tools that are around you, and you call it ingredients, the tools needed for making cider.
Sure.
And everything around us is ingredients is going to eventually come into our body. What are we surrounding ourselves with? So, let's highlight again Friday and Saturday. It is this weekend, the 26th and the 27th. Doors open at 6. Get there before 8 for free admission.
That's right.
And there is going to be music by
Brandon LaRose Band on Friday and Cedar Teeth. And then the Saturday, we've got Jason Webley, fantastic. We've got Petunia and the Vipers coming in. Oh, yeah.
I like that.
And then World's Finest on the highlight. And that's going to be a real fun celebration. We got tabling by School Garden Project, Whole Earth Nature School. We got Beyond Toxics up there. We got a photo booth. We got all kinds of decorations and wild harvested ingredients flooding the area. There's kids' games. So, the daytime's a real celebration to come and hang out. And
You still going to have Thai
fun.
food there?
Oh, yeah. Thai food, Red 5 hot dogs. I like that guy.
He's great.
Yeah. And empanadas, Dominican delights.
I like that. We went not too long ago, went to Crab Cruel.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that stuff is great.
Oh, they're fantastic. It's such a blessing to have this family come in and making such beautiful, authentic food and having them part of our community. It's really been a great relief. It's a family-run kitchen, and my family is able to go in and enjoy it as well. So we've really become, part of the same team, and it's really been a huge support and huge help for our organization. But then what they do, I just think is really special. Best Thai food I've had in town.
And I think it's great that you're able to use your resources and your establishment to help others. That's kind of the whole thing. It comes out of your pores sometimes. Just the want and need to help everyone and the love of community that you have. And it's really appreciated. Now also it's the Spring Fiddlehead Festival.
That's right.
That's what we're calling it. Okay, good. The Spring Fiddlehead Festival. And it's focus on land stewardship with lighthearted conversations on how we are working in our community, how we're using our land stewardship stuff.
And get to meet community members that you might not understand how they're active here or how we're all connected. And really, it's kind of painting the picture. And we're gonna be opening bottles and doing tastings, tasting out of barrels. It'll be fun, you know. And it's a short bit, so if you want to come and be part of this, I recommend getting there a little early, you know, like around 6 o'clock, and then we'll only be talking from like 7 to 8 o'clock. So
See, I call that the good stuff. That's the important stuff that I love. You know, like
yeah, it's kind of like our board meeting. Let's consider it Wildcraft's biannual board meeting, where we give you updates of what's happened, you know, the last year, what's coming, moving forward, and then we have a lighthearted conversation, because why keep it so serious? You know what I mean?
That's true. That's a good point.
Life's too short. Life's too short. Stay funny.
One last time, Friday, Saturday, 26th and 27th, 6 o'clock doors open, 8 o'clock is when music starts, 7 o'clock is when the discussion and the education hour begins. Don't miss that, because it is truly good what Wildcraft is doing and presenting as information and trying to educate all of us on our little box, our cage that we all live in, Earth. You know, it is Earth Day yesterday, and it's the National Native Plants Week. Yeah, so,
definitely. So yeah, it's gonna be fun, man. I look forward to seeing everybody. You know, let's keep it a celebration and just enjoy each other's company. It's a great community. I'm proud to be a part of it.
I like it. Well, see you there Friday.
Thank you. Peace.